So there have been rumours banging around on the internet for probably the last 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks that Roland were going to do something pretty special for 909 Day to mark the 30th anniversary of the D50. And the smart money was that a boutique was going to appear for the D50, and blow me down, a boutique has appeared for the D50, which is the D-05. So let's recap. D50, introduced in 1987, can pretty much be heard on every single major pop record from 1987 probably through to the mid-90s, I would say. And you can still hear the classic patches on the D50 to this day on some records as they're introduced. They're very distinctive. So yes, we've got the D50, the D-05 has arrived. So I did some hunting around, and you know, typical Roland, they've introduced this, they've launched it. You can't get it. It's all pre-order everywhere at the moment, much the same as they've done with all the other boutiques they've launched. Smart money says I don't think we'll see this thing this side of probably the end of November in the UK, although I could be wrong. But given where we are in terms of launch cycle, I suspect it's, you know, several months before people will start seeing their ship. So I did some hunting around on the internet to see, you know, who's actually had the first goes with these. So they've gone out, they've given some of the first units to seminal musicians in the keyboard space, and some companies to review it. Now, the one I found most interesting was the review done by the ADSR guys. So if you go YouTube, ADSR, you'll come across these guys, very, very, very knowledgeable about Roland equipment. Possibly has something to do with the fact that both these guys did work for Roland across sort of the late 80s, early 90s. So they've got lots of in-depth knowledge about how these legacy keyboards were put together and why things were done that way. In fact, I think Jim actually worked on the D50. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I've got this funny feeling I've seen a video where he actually said that he was responsible for a lot of the way the D50 sounds when the D50 came out. So it gives you an idea of, you know, these guys sort of know what they're talking about. And so, you know, given what I've seen, this is my impression of the D-05. I like it. Okay. I like the interface. There's the interface. I just printed that out this morning from one of the websites. Okay. Very small, compact, but still usable, which is what I quite like about that interface. It seems to have all the functions that the D50 had. So it's got two patch banks, sorry, when I said two patch banks, it's got the patch bank and the patch number, same as the D50. It seems to have the chase and portmanteau functions, the partials, the editing, all seems to be there. And that was sort of confirmed by the ADSR chaps. It also comes with a 64-step polyphonic sequencer and also an arpeggiator function. Now, the arpeggiator function is relatively limited, if I'm honest. It's not sort of the same sort of arpeggiator you would get if you were running a Kronos or a Jupiter or something that had an arpeggiation system in it. So it's either one octave up and down, down, or two octaves up and down, down. But it's interesting, you know, you can start to get some interesting sounds on that and then move on to something else if you needed to get the to round your arpeggiation off if you were going to go down that route. The sequencer is an interesting feature. There's not an awful lot about the sequencer at the moment, apart from the fact it's this 64-step sequencer. So we'll have to wait for some more information to come out about that and how you might use that. But of course, the thing about having sequencers on individual pieces of equipment is that sort of makes the main sequencer redundant, or how do you interface that with the main sequencer? Anyway, I've whinged on about that long enough in the past. So that's that. It comes on the website. It says it comes with 64 preset patches and 64 user patches. However, all the reviews I've seen so far seem to suggest it comes with the full 386 patches that were released by Roland for this particular, for the D-50 back in the day on the ROM cartridges. You know, that's pretty damn good, because these cartridges, these cards are becoming very, very hard to get hold of now, and to actually have them available out of the box on this thing is pretty damn good. The other thing I saw the ADSR chaps do is they actually put a D-50 and a D-05 together, and then obviously, you know, sequenced some stuff up and then played it back on both pieces of equipment, so you can actually hear the difference. Now, admittedly, I'm sitting here, I'm not listening to it through professional speakers, it was coming out my laptop speakers, but I would turn around and say that the D-05 seems to have a little bit more depth and a little bit more width to the sounds that were being created. So, you know, like for like comparison, the D-05 seemed to be a little bit deeper and a little bit wider in its soundscape. But again, I was listening to that on my laptop, so, you know, it might be a different matter if you're sort of listening to that through professional monitors in the studio. But, you know, there was a slight difference, and I could pick that up. So, looking at that, the other thing that the ADSR chaps confirmed that they've tried is the D-05 will load sysx files from the D-50, which basically means if you've got other cards or other sounds or patches that you've developed over the years on the D-50, you can actually sysx them out and then sysx them onto the D-05. That seems to be a very, very interesting proposition, if you can do that, because it means you've now got a brand new piece of tech that you can take somewhere. Very small and compact, it's only 2 pounds in weight, it's not a full keyboard, and actually use the custom sounds that you've built for your D-50 or that were built for the D-50. That I find very interesting, the fact that they've honoured that sort of sysx legacy. The other thing they mentioned, which is not in any of the material on the Roland website, is that it actually has 2 modes of operation. It has something called classic mode, and classic mode is very faithfully modelled on the D-50 in terms of how it produced its sound, how the envelopes were produced, etc, etc. And then it also had, or has, something called clean mode, which is where they've looked at the filters and the output and the way the sound is generated, and they've tried to clean it up a bit. Now, the ADSR chaps, when they were doing the review, said they did everything in classic mode, so you got a fair representation. But it'll be interesting to hear how clean mode sounds on the D-50 if you do take out some of the background hum, rumble, hiss, whatever it happens to be. But then, having said that, is it the humble? Is it the hum, rumble, and hiss that makes the D-50 the classic synth it is? Jury's out. So, to sum it up, the one thing I don't like about the D-50, from what I've seen so far, is it's all USB powered like everything else. This is a full 500 milliamp power unit according to the specs, which means it's quite a draw, so you can only have one of those running on a computer without having a powered hub in there. And I've moaned about that already, so I'm not going to carry on moaning about that. And the other thing is that in the UK, I think it's going to retail for about £349. Seems to be retailing about $349 US, so pound for dollar by the sounds of it. Oh God, am I going to buy one? Don't honestly know at this point. I know I bought the TR-08. This one is really equally as tempting, I must admit. And I'll tell you what, if it had power, I would be banging my order in with absolutely no issue whatsoever. But the fact it doesn't have power. And the other thing I have noticed on the Roland website, that's the first time I've ever seen it on the Roland website, it actually states that on batteries it will only run for 5 hours. So that's very interesting. It's the first time I've ever seen that stated on the website. Might be the first time I've ever gone looking for it, but it's the first time I've ever seen that stated, which means you're going to need a lot of batteries for this one. So that's the D-05. Now, the reason why I'm sitting here with a blanket next to me is because, again, those of you who watch this quite regularly will know of my penchant for cheeky eBay bids and winning equipment based on a cheeky eBay bid. Well, this is what this is. This was a cheeky eBay bid. It's on one of my keyboard bucket lists. I've been after one of these for a long time. It came up, I put a cheeky bid in, and bugger me, I won it. So what is it? It is a legendary Roland A-80. This is the MIDI master keyboard, the dog's doodahs of master keyboards. Well, I say that. There were two of them around at the time. There was a series from Yamaha and there was a series from Roland. The Yamaha version of this was called the KX88, if I remember correctly. And I've never ever seen one. I have to be honest, I've never seen one come up on eBay, and I've never seen one in the flesh. They are like gold dust, as far as I can tell. People who have them hang on to them. Similarly, people who have these tend to hang on to them as well. Roland introduced two of these. They introduced the A-50 and the A-80. Not to be confused with the keyboard that came after this, which was the A-90, which is not a MIDI controller. So this is a MIDI controller. It has no sounds of its own on the keyboard itself. As you can see, it's been in a bit of the wars, but it all seems to be cosmetic, because when I went and picked it up, I did actually try the keyboard. It's got a few scuffs around the edges where it's been bashed about, but it seems to be in fairly good nick. All the keys work. So the difference between the A-50 and the A-80 was the A-80 was a full 88 weighted keyboard. And it's got a really quite strong action on it. I mean, that's what I found when I played it yesterday. The A-50, on the other hand, was slightly smaller at 76 keys, but it had a semi-pro keyboard on it, more akin to a sort of high-end synthesizer. So, you know, I've been looking for one or other of these two things, and again, nobody seems to be selling them. They're like absolute gold dust when they come up. So I was quite surprised when this came up, and I was quite surprised when the guy who was selling it accepted my bid, if I'm honest, because I've seen these things go for a lot more than I initially bid. I mean, if I'm brutally honest, I put a bid in just to sort of put a marker there to see how the bidding went, and I was absolutely gobsmacked when I won this. It is damn heavy. It is 30 kilos. God knows what is in here that makes it 30 kilos. I'm suspecting it's probably a metal frame around this weighted keyboard. Now, the reason why I've been after one of these is, as you know, I have a lot of legacy tech in my studio. And the thing about legacy tech is it tends to be MIDI, not USB. And when you play MIDI devices, you have to have a way of getting the MIDI signal there without too many daisy chains. Now, I have a policy in my studio that I try to keep my daisy chains down to 1 or 2 units on any particular cable. In fact, I think at the moment I've managed to get it down to 1 unit, 1 cable, 1 unit, because of the patch unit I put in earlier this year. So in order to control and play those, you need a good MIDI controller, which is what this is. So this actually has on the back of it. And I'm going to try and lift this up and put it on the table actually. Now, let's see if this goes and works. God, this is heavy. It's not high enough, is it? Let me just adjust the camera and I'll be right back. Now I can feel the table straining under the weight of this thing, so I'm not going to leave it there for too long. But if you can see this, I'm not quite sure where it comes across, but effectively what this keyboard has is it has a standard in, out and throw, and then it has another has 4 dedicated MIDI outs, so you can actually have 4 dedicated 16 channels of MIDI being played out by this thing, and there's 4 faders on the front that control the various elements that come out the back of this thing. I'm actually going to take this off the table before it sort of gets the table collapses on me. The one thing you will notice though, if you look at it, is very dusty and dirty and needs a damn good service. Right, I'm just going to put this back on the floor. So as I was saying, you can split the keyboard. You can actually have 4 dedicated 16 channels of MIDI going out. You can split the keyboard in 4 places, so you can have a MIDI channel assigned to each zone, or you can have a combination of MIDI channels or MIDI outputs assigned to each zone, and each one of those would transmit velocity, aftertouch, patch change information. So it becomes a very versatile keyboard, especially if you're working with lots of modules, which is what I do. That's the reason why I bought it. As I say, at the moment, I'm not quite sure what needs doing to it. I know it works. That's always a good place to start. I think much of this is just cosmetic, needs to be sort of stickiness washed off all over and given a damn good clean. And then we'll see where we go from there. I need new pots on the sliders. Those sliders could probably do with some contact cleaner in them as well, I suspect. But other than that, I'm really stoked about having managed to purchase that. I think my muscles are going to grow having to lift the damn thing, because it is really heavy. I mean, I thought the T1 was heavy, but believe me, this thing, I think this is actually heavier than the T1. So as I say, God knows what is inside this thing. I suspect I'll get to find out in the ensuing days. Anyway, that's me done. I've ranted on for long enough, I think, today. So I'm going to go back to my playing. See you later. I've been told it helps the channel out greatly if you hit the like button if you enjoyed the contents of this video. If you want to be notified about future videos that may be made for the channel, please hit the subscribe button.